Hi, and welcome to Prepping Essentials. Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday the 5th of November. Just making my way down to the land, and as always, not quite sure what we're going to get done today, but let's find out. Well, here we are down on the land, and as you can see, there are leaves everywhere. You might have noticed as I was driving in, the windscreen wipers on the car were on. It's been raining pretty much all week. So despite the fact I'm really itching to get all of these leaves scooped up, it's just not possible. As I'm walking around here, I can feel myself sinking into the field. The ground is really quite waterlogged now, so zero chance of getting the little red tractor out. Thankfully, probably due to that extended drought period we had, the grass itself isn't actually that bad. It's not high at all, and it's probably going to stay like this now all the way through to spring. So whilst I do want it to dry out, it's more to get these leaves up rather than to cut the grass. I don't want these lying on the field all the way through winter. So at the first opportunity, once it either dries out or freezes over, I will be out scooping them up. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get ourselves opened up, get the kettle on. Probably need some heat on as well, for that matter. Sort the chickens out, and we'll have a little chat in the cabin. Well, first things first, as usual, sort the chickens out. They're busy pecking around at the mixed corn and seed. Cockerel's busy directing them to where he thinks the best bits are. And as usual, a little bit of squabbling from time to time. We'll get checked in the coop, see what eggs we've got. Production is definitely down, but it is that time of year. And then we'll get in the cabin for a warm-up and a coffee. Well, good morning and welcome to another weekend. It's a tad cool this morning. It has been wet, grey, miserable and cool all this week actually. Bit of a pattern forming here, I think. It's been that way for a few weeks now. Which is a bit annoying because it means that I can't get on with things outside. I mentioned as I was walking across the field this morning, really do want to get those leaves picked up, but it's just a pointless exercise. The little red tractor will just sink into the field and churn the grass up, and I'll end up with a mud bath. And as fast as I'm trying to pick them up, they'll be clogging up in the waste bin at the back of the tractor. So pointless exercise, and I'd only be increasing my frustration levels if I were to try and do that. But there are still a few other things that I can do while I'm down here. Little pottering around type jobs. Gave the diesel heater a good run this morning, just to take the edge off the temperature in the cabin and the garden room, and more importantly, I guess, just to make sure that I keep using it. If you don't use it, you lose it. Things have a habit of breaking down because they've been neglected, so I'm keen not to do that. So I will take the chance today to just check a few of the little bits. I'll probably warm up the engine on the tractor. Similar thing with the generator, and have a general tidy up. It has got a bit messy of late. I've spent that much time doing other things away from the cabin that my visits have been really restricted to either topping up the water and food for the chickens a couple of times a week, checking on the eggs, or doing these cabin chats at the weekend. So not a lot of other stuff has gone on, unfortunately. Not here anyway. Lots going on elsewhere. So, how are we all bearing up with the variety of crises that we've got going on? And as all of these things become more public in knowledge, more visible, and start to have a bigger impact day to day on our general activity, whether that's at home or at work, I guess the question really is, are we reaching the tipping point? And are all of these crises suddenly going to merge and we have the general state of the world falling off a cliff, tipping over? Start out, I guess, with the one that's got lots and lots and lots of media attention over the last few months. And I touched on it quite a bit in the cabin chat last week, and that's the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. We are heading in towards the winter months. The Russians, it would seem, are just waiting for the ground in Ukraine to start to freeze over and become more solid and stable, so that they can push forward with a large mobilisation and a large offensive. Quite what that will lead to, who really knows? But given the activity of a variety of other international players, shall we say, in perpetuating this conflict, there is potential for it to increase and expand on its current borders. The key thing for me this last week has been the amount of formal accusations by the Russian state as to the role that the UK might or might not have played in those recent attacks on Russian critical infrastructure or direct attacks on military targets belonging to the Russians. And the Russians have been very, very vocal in pinning the blame for these on the UK, or the UK government, more accurately. There's been lots of reports in the media from a variety of different government spokesmen and women along the lines of, whilst not categorically denying that the UK had anything to do with these and played no active part in these attacks, the kind of counterclaims have just been along the lines of, oh, this is just usual Russian propaganda. Yet they always say this. Don't pay any attention to it. There were no categorical claims by people in government that the UK had no active role in this. And that's a little bit worrying, because in the eyes of the Russian state, that places the UK by default, because of the actions, potentially. Got to caveat this or I'll get banned from YouTube. Allegedly having no involvement. But in the eyes of the Russians, that really does focus their attention on the UK. And were this conflict to broaden and any NATO countries became directly and visibly directly involved, it makes me wonder who the target would be for the Russian first strike outside of the Ukraine. It could well be us here in the UK. So that is definitely worrying. But having said that, I wouldn't focus your attention on that. It is still something that's going on an awful long way away and doesn't have a direct impact on your day-to-day lives. However, there are plenty of things that do. The economy, first and foremost. We've seen both inflation rates and interest rates for borrowers climb again this last week, as indeed they have and continue to do in other countries around the world. Latest interest rates in the UK are at 3%, so that has effectively doubled the cost of borrowing, particularly around mortgages. Food inflation in particular is up 11.6% year on year. And remember that these are official figures. You can undoubtedly double or in some cases treble that figure. But annual inflation, again measured by government, officially declared figures, over 10% and higher around the world. Countries in Europe, some of them are at 14 and 18% declared inflation rates. So that is having a massive impact and will continue to do so on the value of people's money and the amount of goods and services that they can purchase with that money. It's ever decreasing. Your pound, euro, dollar is worth less and less and less every single month, whilst the price of whatever it is that you want to buy is increasing quite significantly month on month on month. So again, harking back to some of the potential solutions I've talked about in previous videos, please do continue to stock up, and if you haven't yet, get started with stocking up on long-term bulk food stores, whether that's dry bulk foods, canned bulk foods, stuff that will last for a considerable period of time and will give you a buffer against these ever-increasing prices and a buffer potentially against any potential supply chain disruption and unavailability of those goods and services over future months and indeed probably years to come. So don't ignore it, don't live in fear of it, take steps, do something about it. Global supply chain and kind of connected with that, energy crisis. I wanted to focus really on one particular aspect because it does impact on everybody, although a lot of people would not readily identify it as having a direct impact on them, and that's diesel in its various guises. There is diesel that is used to power plant equipment vehicles, and there's diesel fuel, or diesel oil as it's generally referred to, which is used by homes and businesses for heating or for energy, other alternative energy like electric production. I think it's fairly common knowledge to pretty much everybody now that has any exposure to the mainstream or alternative media that there is a shortage of diesel and prices have just continued to climb skyward. I noticed as I was driving in to the land today, the local petrol station just on the outskirts of the village, diesel prices there are £1.92 something per litre. I think I touched on it last week and mentioned that diesel prices in the UK, although they did take a little slight drop a few weeks ago, they quickly went back up again when the Saudis and the other OPEC members decided to cut back on oil production and really shafted it to us here in the West. So they are climbing skyward again. 192 per litre, I don't know what that equates to, 4.5 litres to a gallon, so do the math. But we're generally around the between £7 to £9 per gallon, so that's almost on par now with the dollar. Another little crisis for us here in the UK, the value of our pound. But why is this? And I just wanted to touch on the underlying reasons for this, because it's not as the media would have you believe. This diesel and general energy in all forms shortage or crisis that we're currently having, it isn't the war in Ukraine that's to blame for this. True, it has had an effect on this, but it's not the underlying cause. And I just wanted to kind of clarify that a bit today. The real underlying cause of the current energy crisis, including the diesel shortage, is purely and squarely down to government action, as indeed are all of these various crises that we are currently experiencing. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I do mention this quite frequently, it's true. Everything that we're experiencing now has come as a direct result of the governments in countries around the world, but predominantly in the Western world. It's things that they have done that have created these problems, and diesel and energy in general is included within that. You might remember that over the recent years, governments around the world have banged on about the climate crisis and the need to get rid of fossil fuel. Now that's a laudable quest to go on, but what they've essentially done is just said no more fossil fuel and started restricting the ability of companies that extract oil and gas around the world to continue their current levels of production, and indeed in most cases they've actively cut back. They've refused licenses for new pipelines, they've refused licenses for drilling and other forms of exploration, they've banned fracking. So the companies that produce this energy, you might have noticed in TV advertising over the last year or so, there's been a marked shift, and the global players in the oil and gas industry are now becoming global players in the alternative energy production as well. But that's a long game to play. You can't just suddenly switch over overnight. Research and development and generating money for investment into these alternative sources of energy takes years, and indeed in some cases decades, to achieve, particularly in terms of recovering the initial money that's been invested to the point where it becomes a profit-making enterprise. And essentially that's what business is. It's a profit-generating exercise. It's not done for the good of humanity or me and you, the people. It's a business. The clue is in the name. It's a business. And the objective is to make a profit, just as we, in our daily lives, have our own business of generating enough income to sustain our lifestyle. So when people talk about business, it's an essential part of survival for me, you and everybody else on the planet, in whatever guise that business enterprise takes. So government has been actively deterring or preventing companies from producing energy in the normal way through oil and gas exploration, and demanded they focus instead on alternative sources such as solar, hydrogen, wind, tidal surge. There's a vast array of different forms of alternative and potentially sustainable energy production out there. But as I said, it takes time. So by turning off the tap on the energy producing companies to continue business as usual and generate income to invest in those alternatives, what they've done instead is forced these companies to scale back. So all of the drop in production over COVID, because the demand wasn't there, so refineries were mothballed or removed completely from the business model, exploration stopped, storage capacity started to decline. All of that has been exacerbated now through this current energy crisis and the lack of availability from some countries, namely Russia, or by cutbacks in production by the oil and gas producing nations. So we've seen a marked decline, and all of the processing facility that was turned off in COVID has not been turned back on again. The oil and diesel reserves that countries traditionally held have been gradually declining over the last 5 to 10 years, to a point now where we're seeing national shortages. Fuel reserves in the US were at the lowest levels since 1982. Fuel reserves in the EU at the lowest levels now since 2004. US diesel, specifically, reserves are at the lowest point since 1951. And bear in mind that back in those days, demand and the use of petroleum-based product, plant, equipment and vehicles was nowhere near as high and commonplace as it is now. So what was deemed to be an acceptable supply 10, 15, 20 years ago would be considered a drop in the ocean now. So there is a real problem there with availability, but it's no good just blaming the oil companies, because it's not all down to them. It's predominantly and overwhelmingly due to action by government, as I said before, as is the case with pretty much everything that we're experiencing now in terms of problems or crises. I do sometimes hear it said that, well, it doesn't affect me because I don't use diesel. I run a petrol car, an electric car, whatever. Bit of trivia for you. It's now as expensive, if not more expensive, to recharge an electric car as it is to refuel a petrol or diesel car. How is that possible? We've been told forever now that electric's the way to go, it's way cheaper, save yourself a lot of money, buy an electric car. So again, government propaganda turning out to be complete BS. But I digress. The point I wanted to make with diesel is used literally everywhere. It is the mainstay of the global economy and supply chain. Absolute mainstay. Food production, it's all done using plant and machinery powered by diesel. So all of the stuff that is grown to feed us is produced by means of diesel, and of course even the energy put into the ground in terms of fertilizer and the chemicals that help to prevent loss of crop by pest or disease, your pesticides, your herbicides, are derivatives. They come from oil. So it's an absolute mainstay in actually producing the food that we all eat. And not just that, once you've used that to either boost the fertility of the soil, prevent the pests and diseases, and to actually harvest the food, diesel is then the mainstay in terms of transporting that produce from the farmer's field into the production facilities. Oil and gas is used to power those production facilities. It's then used to ship from the manufacturer into the wholesale distribution process by train, by ship, by truck. It's then in those warehouses and other storage facilities which are powered by oil and gas. It's then shipped again by plane or by train or truck or whatever transportation means, trains for example, to the various supermarkets and shops, and then we ourselves use oil, gas, diesel in our vehicles to go to and from those final retail outlets. It is absolutely the mainstay of the global economy and food production system. So when people say, oh, this diesel problem is not a big issue, I need to emphasise to you, it really is a huge issue. Anyway, apologies for that quite extended little rant there about the current state of things. I guess I really do need to stress, Don't let all of this get you down. Don't scare you into inactivity. Do stuff about it. Little example, I've been hunting around to try and obtain extra supplies of these fuel cans. I think I have mentioned it before, the price of those went sky high during the COVID period, particularly when we had that mini fuel crisis and petrol stations ran out of petrol and diesel due to supply chain breakdown. But the prices of those cans have not gone down. Indeed, they continue to tick upwards. I really do suspect that there is a potential diesel crisis just around the corner. We're already seeing media reports about shortages, so it really would be wise for you to start stocking up on cans to put your fuel into and getting yourselves down to the fuel stations to get those cans filled up. We mentioned the Ukraine war. If that does indeed expand, who do you think is going to suddenly take full control of the diesel fuel supply chain? The military are. They're going to need all the diesel they can get to power their trucks and tanks and all of the other machinery that they use. So if indeed we do head into an expanded conflict in that region, God forbid globally, it's not just it's not just the horror of armed conflict that we would feel the impact of. Diesel would suddenly disappear for average consumers such as me and you, and it would all be diverted to the war effort. So get some cans if you don't have them already, and more importantly, I guess, get them filled up with whatever fuel it is that you use. One thing you also might want to consider getting, if you don't already have one, and by showing this I don't in any way condone any kind of criminal activity, but get yourself a manual powered siphon pump. If there is a shortage, you might want to source or find alternative sources of fuel, or indeed use something like this to exchange it from one container to another, either to refuel your empty cans or to transfer the fuel from your cans into whatever storage tank it is that you're going to be using that fuel for. So your vehicle, petrol or diesel tanks, your diesel oil heater storage tanks. So yeah, you might want to invest in one of those if you don't already have it. Anyway, enough of me. How are things with you? I hope that wherever you are and whatever it is you're doing, you are staying safe and well and enjoying your weekend. Don't know if you can hear that in the background. The rain continues on the roof of the cabin, so there's not going to be a great deal going on. I will take the chance now to run out and give the chickens their greenery, but other than that, there's a little bit of tidying up work in the cabin. There's not else going to be going on here. I will be doing lots of other stuff at home. Some new racking arrived for the garage yesterday, so I'll be busy taking more stuff out of boxes and getting it orderly fashion on the racking. What are you doing to get yourselves ready? Do you have stocks of fuel and a means to transfer that fuel should you need to? How are your long-term food preps stacking up? How many months do you think you have in terms of long-term food stores? And don't neglect your stores of water. I suspect that water would probably continue for quite some time in a big SHTF. But do you have the means to go out and collect water, to filter and sterilise that water? Just a question there. Let us know in the comments section. I've got my final harvests in. The chilli plants are still producing. I'm looking across now in the garden room and can see lots and lots of red ones. They are changing colour quite quickly now. It's going to be interesting to see how long they stand up as the temperatures dip. Yesterday morning, saw the first frost on the windscreen of the car. Lots of people complaining about temperatures dipping. and scared about turning up the thermostat in the house. What plans do you have to keep warm in winter? Do you have your blankets? Do you have sleeping bags? Are you all going to gather in one room and heat just that one room only? Really hardcore, have you considered putting up a tent in a room and having that extra insulation? Do you have sleeping bags? Do you have portable, safe gas heaters or other forms of heating? Have you considered putting a diesel heater in your garage and piping it into your house so that the nasty stuff, the exhaust fumes, are piped externally from the garage while the warm air duct feeds the house? Just a thought. These things have gone up in price, but they're still available. You can buy a portable unit. You don't need to have it hardwired like I have in the cabin, for around £100. And they are very economical when it comes to diesel usage. Assuming, of course, you've made provision and stored up sufficient diesel just in case the supply chain does suddenly stop. Lots and lots of things there that might pique an interest, but do us all a favour, let us know what you're thinking and pop your comments in the comment section below. And while you're there, hit that like and subscribe and share button and help the channel out a little bit. I am conscious from time to time that the number of views on the channel are nowhere near as high as some of the other prepping channels. Now, whether that's because people like checking out the fear porn clickbait titles and thumbnails or not, I don't know. Or do I need to change the theme of the content? Again, let me know in the comment section below. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, number one priority, stay safe and well. Number two priority, keep topping up your preps, and I'll catch up with you later in the video. Well, it wouldn't be the weekend without the greenery for the chickens. They're all busy pecking around there and enjoying their fresh lettuce leaves. I do spoil them. Oh, it's a bit of squabbling. Play nicely, ladies. You would think the cockerel would keep them in order, but he's probably the biggest culprit when it comes to pecking order and making sure that everybody knows that he's in charge. Aren't you? It is nice to watch them content. Not so nice sitting out here in the rain though, I have to confess. Anyway, it is my job. I do have to take care of them. And they do reward me, both in terms of fun factor when I watch them, and of course in terms of egg production. It is a really grey and wet day out here, so there won't be a great deal else going on. I am busy tidying up. I just thought I'd quickly show you how many chilies there are still on this plant, or these two plants. I am harvesting these because although I'm not a great chili fan, I know quite a few people who are, and they are very thankful to receive these. But there's still loads of them, and in varying stages. You can see that one's just turning, but there's another 3 there, but just on that one branch. They are everywhere. There's loads, and they're still coming. There's baby ones there, look. First time of doing these this year, and I am really quite impressed at how many chilies that 2 plants can produce. I just wish it was a staple for me. But it is building friendships and bridges with others. My generosity, no doubt, and hopefully, will be returned over coming months and years by whatever it is I do give. And I do give a lot to family members and extended friends. Go on, we'll have a quick run in the polytunnel, and you can see my ambition with the potatoes. I've been quite fortunate really that so far the frost has held off, and these plants have been able to grow stronger and more mature. The first two I put in there really come on well. Next one also is starting to come on well. And then finally, I did notice earlier, this last bucket, we've got shoots there. We've got some more over here. We've got a few more down here. So even that one, I'm not going to be getting too excited with that one, because I suspect strongly that over the coming week or two, the frost that we saw start yesterday will definitely continue and get stronger. So hopefully these will survive and I'll be harvesting at Christmas. Not really sure about that last one. And look at this, we've still got bloody slugs and snails, look, in here. There's another one there, look. Bloody things, get out. No, it doesn't, I can't get it off the plastic, it's sticking. Oh, there we go. Ah, they are everywhere. Anyway, it's food for the birds. So that's it. The rain is getting stronger and stronger, so I'll just finish off a couple of little last minute tidy up jobs in the cabin, and then that'll be it for today. Well, that's it for this video. I hope there was something in there that was of interest to you. If you did like the video, please do click on the like button. Also feel free to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. As always, I welcome any comments, questions or suggestions you might have. Just feel free to leave them in the comments section below. But for now, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.